So Steve Cadigan, thank you so much for joining us. We've really enjoyed working with you as a mentor and advisor at Honeit, and it's been so fun to follow your career. I remember following you at LinkedIn, right, where you led the people team, and here it was kind of twofold in my experience. It was building and scaling a startup that was LinkedIn, but you're also building a technology company that was helping recruiters and new tools for recruiters at the time. So I always admired you as a chief people officer and, pushing the limits in Silicon Valley and talking about things like culture and empathy and things like that when not everybody was talking about it. So Steve Cadigan, thank you. Welcome to the Honeit podcast. Everyone, Steve has a new book. I do want to just give a formal shout out to Workquake. It's available now. Steve, do you have a copy? There you go. Embracing the aftershocks of COVID-19 to create a better model of working. So obviously a lot is packed into that title. And I know you love talking about the future of work. I wonder if you could just rewind the clock a little bit, talk a little bit about, that experience at LinkedIn. We talk a lot about competition, and I know you mentioned competition leads to kind of innovation when it comes to that war for talent. Can you talk a little bit about what the TA team was like at LinkedIn during those crazy first few years?
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned something about that experience, which is really true, and I feel really blessed to have experienced it, or I should say survived it. Is being able to practice your craft as someone who loves recruiting, someone who loves the world of talent, but also practice that craft in an organization that's making solutions in that field. So I could advise on product. I went on a number of sales calls. That was really, really interesting. So we had, from when I started, probably that was almost the entire team in 2009 when I started, was mostly recruiters. And that's what we were doing. We're going through hypergrowth, and we doubled the size of the company every year I was there, about four years. And that's in the shadows of Google, something that is amazing to be able to do when you're getting outpaid, out-benefited, out-perked, out-work environmented by every sort of sexy brand that you're recruiting against. And worse, Nick, you're arming them to compete against you because they were LinkedIn customers.
Using your tools. Yeah, using the tools to find your employees, to recruit
That's right.
them out of,
So that was hard, but
wow.
But you bring up the necessity for creativity. And this is why I loved recruiting in the heart of Silicon Valley. I mean, we recruited around the world, but the focal point of the product and engineering team, the real brains of our future, were in the hands of people we wanted in buildings. And I know as we're recording this, the world's a little bit different and sideways relative to what that may look like in the future. But at the time, my leadership team was very adamant. Listen, we're going through organizational puberty. We want product and engineering together, not just in one building. Like, we want them in one floor so they can see energy, immediately course correct, build relationships, communicate in real time. And so we're like, okay, well, how's that going to work? Because our offer decline rate was really, really significant. And when you're competing against people that can pay more, can out benefit and out perk and out work environment and all that, it really forces you to get clear on why would anyone want to work in your company. And you have to go beyond the usual, which most companies do. And I advise them, don't go there, because everyone's saying the same thing, which is, we're nice. We have a nice culture, working on a big problem. We have good investors. We're going to make a lot of money. And I say to that, well, everyone says that. So what is above and beyond that that you can offer? Is it going to be a growth opportunity? Are there going to be amazing people I can learn from? What problems are we solving? And do they matter more than other places? And what culture is really going to inspire me to do some of my best work? And so we, out of necessity, really had to double down when things got to the point where we had so many offer declines. It got to the point, Nick, where we're like, man, if the outside world, our customers, understand or learn that we do not have an effective recruiting process here, that is not going to go well for the business. So we better figure this out. And as Jeff Weiner said, failure is not an option. We hit the skids about in 2010 as we were starting to sniff, hey, maybe we want to go do an exit. And Jeff said, this is the biggest point of blockage in our future right now, is our inability to recruit at the pace we want we were always getting good quality people, but just not as rapidly. And we knew the supply was limited because we have the dashboard of talent at LinkedIn. And so, we finally realized the only real lever that we had, and, we went from probably 6 recruiters when I started in 2009 to probably 56 in 2010. Like, we added a lot. We realized that what we had was a problem that was worth solving, and that we had a culture where we wanted people to do the greatest job they've ever had, because we're LinkedIn, we're the professional network. Mm-hmm. This is a place where you should have the best job. We're the professional network. And so we're like, oh yeah, we should be. And it was really many, many long, brutal, argumentative, aggressive staff meetings where we were trying to figure out how we're going to solve it, And we tuned everything. I mean, we broke down the recruiting process into about 400 things that we could measure. 400. And for a few months when things were rough, Nick, I had to spend 2 hours every day with the CEO going through our progress on every 400 steps.
Did he challenge you to come up with the list, or is that how did you get to this idea of let's do this like an engineer would? Let's map out the process. Let's investigate each bottleneck,
I think he the whole team was helpful in this. The whole leadership team was, we're going to call whenever we have code that's not working or something's broken on the site, it's called a code red. And so we call the talent code red. And I personally was a little bit apprehensive. I'm like, listen, this is not about a bunch of processes. There's a whole bunch of other things like brand perception. There's a whole bunch of other things like what really great technical talent wants is to work with a luminary, and we didn't have a luminary on staff. Like, I knew that there are some other things. There's things like, if you really want to recruit at scale and pace, your hiring managers have to dedicate themselves to this. This is not about recruiters. This is about the whole organization. So we learned a lot. And I think it was David Henke, who was our head of operations, was really good around, this is how agile teams really are going to tackle this. Let's break it down. I had 2 women on my team. One, Shannon Benjamin, who I think is currently the head of recruiting at Pure Storage, who is phenomenal and had done a lot of anatomical sort of engineering of recruiting at Microsoft at scale. Okay. She and Jackie Leonard, who ran a lot of our contingent workforce recruiting, got together and they put to a list of, started with like 50, then it was 100, then it was 150, 200. And then we were looking at everything. I mean, everything. Things like how many interviews get rescheduled and why are they rescheduled and who rescheduled them? And how many days does it take when we reschedule to get it rescheduled actually? Things like when someone signs an offer letter, how many days from signing that till they start? And why is it what it is? You see, like all kinds of things. Then my favorite one, and this one was not one that had a daily cadence to it. My favorite one was, how effective do we know that we're doing in recruiting? And let's go look at all the hires we made the last 2 years and see how they've done. And we did this in one organization, and we said, okay, well, let's just use a subjective measure, which is what performance measurement is mostly, which is rating and ranking. So in this department, we use the product organization of the people that we hired who are superstars, who interviewed those people, and who said, hey, there's a superstar here.
Yes or no.
And who said yes, who said no. And we found our highest performing manager had said no to every superstar hire that we've made. Said, don't hire, which was phenomenally interesting. And and this guy was amazing, and he was great, and he was a great mentor to all those people he said no to. And we said, are you looking to hire Jesus here? Like, who are you trying to hire? And we just showed him the data, and he's like, we didn't have to say anything. This guy's so smart. We said, I want you to see this data, and I want you to tell us your reaction to the data. Like, we're not here to scold you or anything. Right. Like,
just show them the facts. Or show them
were you thinking that your interview feedback was something different? Were you saying, no, they're not going to be a star? Or are you saying, no, we shouldn't? Like, maybe you're answering a different question than we were asking. Maybe we weren't asking the right question in the right way. You see? So we were taking on some of the ownership to sort of give him some breathing room to sort of figure this through. He's like, no. He goes, I get it. And he's still, he's an executive in another organization now, and he had a great run at LinkedIn. But those were the kinds of things that, when many organizations out there in the world today are facing real challenges in recruiting, how deep have you gone to understand your flow? you know?
I'm impressed you could actually rewind the tape and go back and dust off those records in terms of that interview feedback, right? I mean, I think even that used to be a chore to even try to get more than a thumbs up or thumbs down, or, you know, and we spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, interview data and interview intelligence.
Right.
And like, what questions were asked? What was a good answer?
Right.
How do you know?
You're right, Nick.
You know,
yeah.
So, I mean, the fact that you could go back and look at the interviewers and find the trends of who's actually a good interviewer in your firm or not based on outcomes. I think that I don't think companies are still organized enough to be able to look back on that data.
Yeah. Well, I'm painting a prettier picture than it really was. It was kind of a cluster, honestly. And we had to go back and we had to it wasn't in one place. We did have the benefit being linked in with our suppliers, that when we started to, and not at the time that I'm talking about, but afterwards, when we started to take a turn for the positive and look like we were going to be a unicorn, that all the vendors wanted to be attached to us. So they would respond to our calls quicker, adjust, tweak, you know, fix the tools a little bit better. But my biggest problem was I couldn't get my managers to even use the tools that we had. And think about this, Nick. This is another irony that you face when you're at LinkedIn and your managers are using tools that they think are crap, and they say we could build something better. I'm like, well, you haven't, and you won't, because it's the ATS at that point wasn't on our dev map. It was later. We came up with sort of like ATS Lite, if you will. But we tried to acquire an ATS company back in the day, and it just didn't work out. But you know, when you have your hiring managers in product and engineering teams saying the tools you're using for talent suck, and we could do something better, and you're like, well, make it then. And they're like, well, we don't have the time to do it. It's like, well, then you got to use this at least, you know, give me some data, you know? And so these are the kind of arm wrestling matches that were pretty regular in my role.
I bet. I spent a short stint at Taleo. I worked at Taleo coming from after MTV Networks, moved out to the Bay Area to get closer to tech, and found a job at Taleo. And I was thinking, oh, that'd be a really interesting position. I've been a power user of Taleo as an admin, and then, you know, as a recruiting leader, but getting to work at a company to try to develop some tools. And I realized as soon as I joined, the Oracle acquisition was in play, and that recruiters didn't have so much feedback or input on the platform as I was hoping, you know, as a recruiting ops person. So had a small taste of that. But one of the things I can't help but think about too is in that time frame when you're in Mountain View next to Google in that hyper competitive talent market, you know, technology has typically had a lower retention term than other sectors, you know, and I know we talk about the different generations and working for a company for 20 years, and that's changed obviously with newer generations. But even in tech, it has been shorter on average than other industries. Well, now with COVID, we're seeing like a global average of 10-year drop, right? Didn't I read somewhere that it's like 2.5 years or something like that is the average
for the age group? Yeah. 25 to 35. It's about 2.5. Yep.
Yeah. So
that's the median, which means half of that number is less. Right? Half the population is less.
Wow. And so you're talking about how do you hire, obviously getting through the interview hire process, decision-making process, hiring process, onboarding process to get someone actually productive. And then, you know, if they're not fulfilled or whatnot, starting to already look outside of that, you know, 6 months before that 2.5 hours or 2.5 years. So I guess this could be a few things, right? I mean, I think this I've read in some of the podcasts you've done and conversations, you've talked about this kind of staying in one place is kind of stagnant, and like people don't feel like that's danger, right? If I'm not always learning, if I'm not going to be competitive, and I wonder if that, you know, we talk about automation over the last 20 years a lot. Automation obviously disrupted manufacturing, where robots could build things faster than humans can. I almost wonder about like this Web 2.0 that we're in, the LinkedIn tools, finance tools, marketing tools. Is that kind of this automation of this middle management skill set where, you know, if you were really great in Excel, well, a new accounting program might render you obsolete, you know, and not have to add those equations or know how to do pivot tables and things. What are you finding is the main driver? Is it that the skills are changing for companies? People are looking thinking its grass is greener? Do people think they can learn faster at a startup? Which of those do you think got us to kind of where we're at with this 2.5-year retention model?
All of it, Nick, and more. All of it and more. We've been telling the workforce way before the pandemic that artificial intelligence is going to take your job. We're going to go to automation and use robotics. That we've seen, and this has been proven, hard skills are changing, and the usefulness, the length of them being career useful for you is shrinking. It used to be about 50, and all the experts are telling us today it's about 5 to 10 years that a hard skill is relevant. And it's because of the technology that we've created, needing new skills to implement and to operate. And so we've been scaring the workforce. We've been telling them, technology is coming. So people are saying, well, I'm going to take control of my future. I'm not going to ask or expect the company to do that. So that in part is driving people to be, pursue more independence and ownership of their circumstances, right? Plus we've had countless layoffs, countless rifts, and you've got a workforce, particularly the younger one, who's seen their parents just, give everything and then just get dropped without a second thought by a lot of these organizations. And I'm not pointing fingers at companies being, cold and ruthless, but that's just what we've seen. And companies have to be competitive. Plus, what it takes to build a business, the length of time it takes to build a business, the expense is lower than and faster than it's ever been. So, for me, it was captured when Reid Hoffman was once asked, well, hey, Reid, in the early days of LinkedIn, who's your biggest competitor? Who do you worry about? And he's like, the company that hasn't been invented yet. That's who I worry about. Because a paradigm game changer can come about. And then you overlay that, Nick, with let's take a look at the last 20 years and how many new industries have been created. New industries are being created. Let's take a look at share workspaces, electric cars, Uber, Airbnb, 23andMe, Pinterest, Instagram, Snap, LinkedIn, Facebook. These are not just new jobs in these places. They're new careers. So it makes people look at and at the same time, the talent's looking at GE, which has done a colossal, market value loss, face plant, belly flop. And then last week, they just split into 3. And that used to be the most revered company in American business history. Great leadership, everything. That is definitely not a safe place now. So what is? Where should I go? We've got massive career confusion. And LinkedIn has played a role in this because we can see more opportunity than ever before. And that's beautiful, right? I think about my kids, wow, you've got more visibility to how you can build a career than at any time in life. There's no more doctor, lawyer, teacher, dentist, fireman, policeman. No, there's infinite possibilities.
Right.
And LinkedIn's been able to show infinite ways you can get those. It's not just I become an accountant, I major in accounting, therefore I'm going to go into accountant, or I major in business, therefore I'm a CEO. LinkedIn's proven that CEOs come from hundreds of different paths, right? So what that does is it also presents a problem. It presents a problem, and this leads to why people are leaving faster, which is sort of behind your big question, what's going on? I think part of it is we see more of what's possible, but we know more of why we may or how we may have made the wrong choice than ever before. Because as soon as I make a choice, I see Nick's over there at Honeit and they're going on some trip to Hawaii, or they're letting their team work from different, whoa, we don't have that in my company. So maybe I chose wrong. And so I think that awareness is causing people to second guess their choices and then maybe make another one.
That peek behind the curtain, that transparency, that peek behind the curtain of what it could be, and not, wow,
that's right.
My snack room or my,
And so you second guess. And I had right before you and I got on, I was talking to an HR leader in the analytics space, and they have changed jobs 4 times in the last 5 years. And he's like, I got a story. I got a story. I said, of course you do. I'm not here to, second guess but he was aware that he changed jobs. And he's probably thinking to himself, I bet, I've got to show a little more continuity here, or should I? I wasn't sure. We don't know, what does a good career really look like today? And that's partly why I wrote Workquake, is to sort of say the landscape's changing. I don't know what the long-term answer to that question is going to be, but what a career looks like is not staying in one place anymore. And as you said, I did point out in my book, I think the generation of workers today is feeling like the longer I stay, the more vulnerable I'm becoming, more stagnant, the slower my pace of learning. And I can't have that. because everyone's telling me in all the rhetoric in the media and the companies are, we need change, new skills, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go get some new skills, right?
Yeah, and that first in, or last in, first out thing doesn't seem to necessarily be the case if depending on the skill set and depending on the growth of the new company and things. I've always wondered why, internal mobility hasn't, we've not seen any either products or really incredible programs. I mean, I see rotational programs that have been around for a while. Hey, you spend 6 months here, you spend 6 months here, to try to give that person a taste of the different types of product management in a company. And then they figure out where they want to sit in the stack and then can commit to two. Like, I feel like mobility could be an answer here for innovative companies willing to let someone try new things under their walls, even if it's virtually or whatnot. But what's hard about mobility? You probably saw that firsthand at LinkedIn, even with an innovative company. Where does that break? Where's the friction with making internal moves?
There's a couple of main drivers that cause headwinds to realize that at scale. Well, first off, no two companies are alike. So you may have great variability in the requirements you need to perform your business. Or you could have a business like Spotify that says every 2 years you have to change jobs. They're building movement in, and they don't have, in most of the organization, I would think, deep experience necessitating you having in your possession before you move to another role, right? So that's pretty cool. But the biggest blocker, believe it or not, and this is one of those things that people just don't like to talk about, but we're going to do it because that's how we roll here at Honeit. The biggest blocker to internal movement is what I call human nature. So you go to a manager and say, hey, we got to move talent around. They go, the talent that I trained, the talent that I built, the talent that's performing, the talent that's putting food on my table. You mean I got to move that talent over there? Oh, hell no. I'm not doing that. What, try to sell. We tried to do this at Cisco back in the early 2000s when we hit the stumbling block. Like, hey, we hired a bunch of GE HR people and they're like, hey, your measure as a leader is going to be on how well you grow talent and move it around. And so what happened was the leaders, tell a sales leader. I mean, let's just get real simple. Tell a sales leader, you got to move your best people. And they're like, are you kidding me? Hell no. My number, and then it comes down to trust. Are you really going to not dock me because my sales numbers go down because you're making me move some of my best people? So human nature, territorialism, that's a big blocker. Right. And the only way to, move on from that is to build trust in your organization. And I've never seen it, at scale to the point where you're doing that. That's number one. Number two is having a database of awareness of the talent in your organization. So, and this is my biggest pet peeve right now, Nick. I mean, you're getting me, my thoughts are forming and I'm not ready to go prime time yet, but I'm going to sort of play around with this with you. And I'd love to get your reaction is, most of my clients are dying right now because they can't recruit at the pace that they think they should be. Okay. We are going through the great resignation. I call it the great career migration. We've got a lot of attrition and nobody thinks it's going to slow down, by the way, even post like 2 years out. I think we're only going to see an increase. And I think this summer, we're going to see the biggest number of resignations ever because the early movers, the people that don't have kids and they don't have school years to work around, they can't move. But the other people who don't, they've already moved. So I think we're going to see that. But here's where the challenge comes in. Is like, so I go to the clients and say, oh, so your biggest problem is recruiting? I said, okay, well, can you tell me what the level of awareness is of the people that you do have in your company right now, what skills they have and what skills they could build? And that's when you hear crickets. Nope, don't know that. I said, well, how dare you tell me you've got a recruiting problem if you don't have any skill awareness? And, that every employee, this is something I talk about in my book, which just drives me crazy. Shouldn't every company know how every employee, to the extent to which, or the percentage which every employee is qualified for every other job in the company? Shouldn't we all, isn't that something it should be just a birthright? If I'm going to work for you, I want to know how qualified I am for every job in your company. But you know why that doesn't exist? Because of partly human nature, but partly because people don't care enough. So don't come to me and say you got a recruiting problem when you have people leaving and they could have done another job in your company, but you didn't make them aware because you're not aware. right? And so when I share this to people, like, well, it's so common sense. Yeah, it is, but why is it so uncommon then? How could you not know all the skills of your people? Now, there's another reason why that's a problem, because every company I've worked for tried it to some degree or another, say, okay, employees, we're going to put our learning platform together,
right,
and you need to go in and put in all your skills. And the employees are like, why? Why would I give you that? Can't you just get it from my LinkedIn? Well, you can import and self-select in, opt in. But what happens is that what's the reason to do that? The reason to do that is what's in it for the employee. And the employees are not seeing the long-term value in doing that at scale. Like, sure, you're going to get, I would say 30, 40% people like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. And I would also argue that 30 or 40%, a good proportion of those are people that other people are not going to want to hire in the organization, and they're frustrated and they want to move, and like, yeah, you're the problem, not the company. But anyway, it's a complex issue. It's not simple to solve, and human nature is a big driver. Lack of awareness and lack of prioritization of recognizing you need to be aware of all the skills is a big part of it, right?
I would think, historically career journeys were quite linear, and you knew what your career, if you stay at one company, you go from manager to, or whatnot. There's every career path is pretty set. Nowadays, we know it's very different. You go from, solutions engineering into your first product role, right? And then, but you've got an engineering background. Well, engineering and solutions engineering was the great foundation that kind of got you into product management. But you needed the industry knowledge, you needed some technical capabilities, and you needed knowledge of that company's products and platforms and services. Put that together. Now you're creating new products for the company, but hard to get into product management, let's say. So I think, like figuring out, every company's different, but figuring out what are those building blocks in terms of knowledge or skills or exposure to the particular company's customers. All of that stuff comes into play of like, what would be a career map that works for your company, but isn't obvious. And then making that easier to navigate without all this, to your point, data entry, or feeling it like another platform that's just there because we want to say we have an L&D benefit or something like that. Yeah, it's interesting.
It is, Nick. And let's play this one out, because this is really important for people to understand and get their heads wrapped around. And this is why when people say, hey, Steve, I got a recruiting problem, I say, no, you don't. You don't have a recruiting problem. You're not recruiting, but that's not the big problem. That's a problem. It's not the big problem. Let's go back to what we talked about before, which is the pace of skill changing. Okay. And let's talk about, let's just get real, because we probably got a fair number of recruiters who are in the audience here. What is the average length of time that a job description is accurate? How long are job descriptions accurate when someone's hired into a job? How long do you think it is? What would you guess?
Oh, well, I would say people are copying and pasting the job description that was written from
right. So probably wasn't accurate before someone even hired it. Okay,
still no longer accurate, but I mean it's stale, and it's what it is, and it has the stale bullet points that someone who's qualified for that job already know it's a part of that job, right? So what's on the job description doesn't provide much value at all by definition to the person who's probably qualified, because they know what an account manager does, or they know what a
right.
So I mean,
but you see where I'm going with this one, right? It's every job is changing and morphing, okay, and all the skills that we're going to need are going to continue to change and morph. So if you play this out, you're going to have a recruiting problem if you think that I'm going to always need to go hire new skills. You're not going to have a recruiting problem if you realize I'm going to need to build new skills in order to thrive. I have to get in that business, because the open market hunting for talent is costly and it's time consuming. And I know my people are going to continue to leave at a faster clip. So I need to be the place that, and this is where I had a lot of conversations with learning experts in the last few months. Learning, training, development is moving from that department in HR to the core of a business. If you want to be vital in the technology world tomorrow, you have to become a talent development engine. You cannot rely on universities. You can't rely on people poaching other people from other places, because the inventory is just never going to be there. And by the way, I don't think people want to be loyal to companies anymore. I think they want to be loyal to their learning. And that's another point that I bring out in work. Like, So, and we've got this notion that the way we build is to keep people stationary in jobs and departments a long time. And human nature is a big contributor to that. But the truth is, if you ask yourself, when have you had the most energy in doing anything in your career? Has it been when you've been doing the same thing for a long period, or when you took on something new? Always took on something new. Look at the adventure you're having with Honeit. I mean, you can't even measure probably the energy that you've had building this organization versus working for somebody else, right? Because every day your head's exploding with new challenges, new exciting things, and new opportunities that maybe you've never felt before, right? You and I've talked about like going and raising money. Well, you're not trained to do that in any corporation that I know of, except maybe business development, because you're trying to, do that. But that's a new activity, and that's exciting and scary, but it's also energy building, right? It's like, man, if we can slay this dragon, we're going to have, some fuel in our tank to be able to do some new things. So that's pretty and now you've got a reason to want to learn that, because man, if I learn that, that's going to be a competitive advantage for us. Right. And so, but that's a big miss. We're not recognizing that internal learning in organizations is a huge opportunity.
That you connected a couple of dots there, which are really interesting. So, I mean, LinkedIn was aware of that with the lynda.com acquisition, which I think was a brilliant move for content and for upscaling and such. But it's still to your point, it wasn't the employer could kind of opt in and offer more because they're a LinkedIn customer. They could offer now these training modules and things like that for people to learn. I remember we had some direct experience with some teams at General Assembly, right? You probably remember General Assembly, where I don't know, I could be anything by day or my day job. I could be a barista. I could be working restaurants. I could be a orthodontist assistant, yet I want to learn to code, or yet I want to work in a tech company. And so General Assembly would figure out this program. Some people even quit their day jobs to take it. Other people could do it in the evenings or weekends and things like that. But it was this opportunity to kind of take this immersive course on, let's say, user interface design. And we even with Honeit partnered with a couple of teams of 3 or 4 at General Assembly who were dedicated. We gave them a problem. They did all the steps, the user research, the mock-ups, the prototype. They went through like a 12-week intensive with us and helped us solve some really interesting UI challenges. Mm-hmm. Then when they graduate the problem, there was that disconnect, is that they had a little bit of skill, but not quite enough to get that job. And I feel like that's where that kind of broke, right? But if that was a company saying, hey, marketing coordinator, you want to get into another part of the organization, here are the resources, here's an opportunity, and then maybe there is some spot at the end of that for the successful completion and or demonstrated capabilities, or to your point, like whatever the thing is to demonstrate that you couldn't make that transition successfully. And now we've got a happy, motivated, energized employee who's doing something a little bit new, even if it's a little bit new, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I feel like that I was so excited about that General Assembly model where people could kind of learn to code or learn a new role, but there was something at the end of that they couldn't get that job because they didn't have a year of experience doing that thing, Right.
And that's all a paradigm that some hiring managers just aren't willing to sacrifice. So what does lack of experience really mean to a hiring manager? It means risk, right? And if you're a recruiter and you've got someone who's got the year of experience, or someone over here who's shown that they can grow and learn really fast, but they don't have the year of experience, who are you going to put forward? The person, and if you're getting paid by how many you fill, it's the person who's closer to the spec, not the person who's going to be a bit of a risk, right? And so the system is not built for us to take risk on people, which is a shame. But because you and I talked a little bit about this off air, what we all remember, that mentor, that coach, that person, someone took a gamble on us at some point in our career, and that was a turning point. I was hired at Cisco back in 1998 to do mergers and acquisition integration, and I had never touched any part of a merger acquisition in my entire career. Wow. And I was so scared that they wanted me to do that. I turned the offer down. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I'm going to fail. You got to fire me. And they're like, no, you don't understand. You have a sort of a non-traditional way of looking at these kinds of people, things in HR. That's what acquisitions are all about. It's all about the exceptions. It's not about the norm. We think you're going to be really good at this. I'm like, well, and it took a lot of convincing, right, for me. And then I accepted it, and they were 200% right, 200% right. But I didn't see it, and I didn't know. And that was someone I talk about in my book, Mimi Jagu, who, bless her heart, passed away a few years ago. But she never went to college, had a PhD in understanding human beings, and was just a non-traditional thought leader. And that's something that I think, we miss opportunities when we overbox people, and thinking that they have to be exactly that profile. And so I'm going to bring this full circle to some of the things we've talked about, Nick. So the pandemic is going to, and the challenge of the big resignation and many people pivoting, not just changing jobs, but changing paths, is going to force companies to have to look at their talent portfolio differently, right? It's going to force them with how they recruit, how they think about people and jobs. And I even think, and this one really hit me hard. I was in Atlanta a few weeks ago. This organization they make all the packaging for all the candies and chips in America, pretty much, right? Yep. And so they have these huge manufacturing plants, and the head of manufacturing, he and I were hanging out for a while, and he's like, I said, how's it going? He goes, turnover's like ridiculous. Can't keep people. And I said, well, how sophisticated are some of your jobs? He goes, well, the toughest ones are ones running some of these machines. It takes 6 years for me to train. And then after 7 years, they leave. And I'm thinking, well, why does any job take 6 years to learn? And if you're losing someone in the 7th year, I think maybe you need to re-engineer that job. Maybe you need 3 people that only takes you a year to learn a part of that job. Are you sure you need 1 person to learn? I mean, how can that be? And in this world where people have got seeing everything going on, like, who's going to hang out for 6 years? And so he didn't like to hear that from me at all, because it's hard, right? And I said, well, go to your machine shop that's making these, printing, whatever these machines are that are having to be operated, and say, I need you to build me a different machine, and I need something that doesn't take someone 6 years to learn how to do this. Any company right now, I don't care what it is. I mean, maybe NASA's an exception because, you're putting someone in outer space. People, are not, I would think, have a long-term vision here, or for people's lives on the line. I don't want people coming and going. But any job that takes forever to learn, years to learn in a business, I think you're putting yourself at risk. You're going to have to re-engineer how the job gets done. And this is another thing when people say, I've got a recruiting problem. I said, I think you might have a creativity problem. Maybe you need to re-engineer work. What you don't need, what you think you need, is a full-time employee. Maybe you just need that work getting done somehow, some different way. You see what I'm saying? And this is a moment, I think, for us where if you're continually struggling to recruit, you're going to have to rethink the whole thing's up for grabs right now in terms of how we need to think about work. And that includes job designs, and people are not ready to do that because they built business models on full-time employees, right? And so that we've built this structure, and I think we're going to face, we can't hire people. We're going to have to build a different structure, right? Like all the retailers, we can't hire retail staff for Christmas shopping. If you haven't figured out e-commerce by now, retailer, you're dead.
What part of that future of work we talk a lot about is the kind of return to work, and in whatever whatever format that might be, right? Some companies are, the nimble companies and probably the smart companies are saying, nope, fully remote. Maybe there's some restrictions here or there due to payroll taxes or whatnot, but we've shown success. We recognize we can now widen the talent pool, and so that's great. There's people there. There's other companies, who are hedging, right? And they're kind of like setting a start date for next June or July, and then recruitment until then is, well, do I need to find someone in New York next to the office because in 7 months or 8 months we're going to need to be in the office, or where are we looking for talent for the next 7 or 8 months, or for the last 18 months? And so you have these companies that are hedging, What are your thoughts on a competitive talent strategy of actually making a decision now, maybe not waiting for the competition, either one way or the other? Nope, we're actually going to put a line in the sand. We're coming back to the office and we're going to deal with the consequences. Or nope, we're going to try to adjust and become a remote company. Or even if you choose hybrid, defining it, getting everybody on board so that we can source and recruit and attract and explain what that company's for. What are your thoughts on how and who makes that decision and maybe what that talent strategy could be as a result?
Right. Every organization's facing this right now. It's a really good topic, Nick. I feel right now, we unfortunately are still on unstable ground. We have not hit quote normal. And there's a lot of organizations, as you say, who are feeling this urge to make a decision. Now, making a decision when the ground isn't stable, I think is very, very risky. All the companies last year, oh yeah, we're going to be remote from now on. Really? I said, why? Maybe it's not good for your employees. Maybe it's not good for your customers. Maybe it's not good for your ability to create value. How do you know that's the right thing? Because you've never done it before. So I say, and this is highly unsatisfying for people who want a decision, which is the best practice right now is experimentation. Let's try it out. Let's try this team. You work from home for a while. This team, you work in 2 days. This team, you work 3 days. This team, you work together, but not in the office. You find some other satellite field, and we're going to learn what works for you. We're going to learn what works for us, and we're going to try to, find our groove. And if a company's trying to solve this in a one size fits all, it's not going to work. The cat is out of the box. Here's the deal. Work just got far more personalized than it's ever been. And let's just start with every employee has a different definition of their personal safety right now. And that's real. We never, ever had to face a decision. Hey, Nick, we're going to have a meeting next week, 25 of us in a room. And Nick's going to go, hell no, my kid's sick at home. I'm not bringing a germ in, and I'm definitely not bringing a germ home. I'm not doing that. And you're like, we never had that discussion before. Now it's real. It's here. Well, why does it have to just be around personal safety? What it's around, I got to pick kids up at school. I want to get a haircut this time. I want to do my shopping. I got to go walk my dog, take care of my mom, whatever. It just got personal. And if we've proven, now some jobs definitely need people together. Some jobs are frontline and manufacturing and so forth, or frontline retail stuff. There's not a lot of flexibility that can be offered in the way that someone who can work from home can do. But you can change hours, shift times, days of the week. There's a lot within that you can do. But again, it's hard. We've never done it before. All our business models, software wasn't built for managing people in this way. So that's why it's really, really hard. So what I would say is you have to experiment. You've got to ask your employees what's working, what's not working. And I really, we see different ends of the spectrum. On this hand, you've got JP Morgan that says everybody back in the office. That's how we roll. And it's not as simple as, oh, they're just mean and they're, very archaic in their business styles. Actually, I think they're concerned about internet security and privacy of their data in the homes of all their employees, and they're managing trillions of dollars of money. That's legitimate. And the markets have a finite period of when they're open and when they're closed. And there's tools and technologies that can't be accessed with the speed and the immediacy that they've, there's been movies made around 3 seconds impacting, billions of dollars.
Yeah, so, that fiber optic line goes under the.
That's right. You saw the same one
ocean
I did. Yeah.
To their building. You can't replicate that at home.
There's reasons, right? And now JP Morgan, okay, maybe if I was Jamie Dimon's peer leader, I would have said, you might want to communicate a little differently than you're not hustling unless you're in the office. Okay. They may have a smaller addressable talent pool, but you have, on the other hand, a company like Canva, which said last month, we're going to let teams decide how they want to work. We're not going to decide from the core. We're going to decide at the fringe, the front line. Every team's going to decide. All we're going to ask is that you're in the office at least 8 days a year. Now, how they came up with that, someone's like, well, it's 2 days a month, so we know they're still alive, and we're not just sending a check to someone's home that is deposited. We don't even know they're alive. Like, I don't know. How did you come up with 8 instead of 10 or 20? I don't know. But that's what they did, and that's pretty interesting. And I think a lot of people are like, dang, they're doing that. Now I'm going to have to follow suit, right? Because the bar is now we have, a line in the sand. Like that's a choice that someone has, and they're hiring like crazy at Canva right now.
And I think employees that becomes part of that culture of making a decision faster, being a little riskier. And I would imagine employees are attracted to a company that's willing to make a decision, and then maybe they change their mind. Maybe it doesn't work,
right.
but at least they made a decision and they were the first. And employees will be able to uncover the person who made that decision first, or the fast followers, right?
That's right.
And you never want to be a fast follower, right? You want to be the company that's leading the helm and making the change and building the tools. And so, yeah, I think good for Canva on making a decision.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun for us to watch, how this plays out. Honestly, yeah, I hear what you're saying, Nick. I mean, it really is impossible. A lot of the choices that organizations are having to face right now. It just one after another after another. I mean, I'm talking to a lot of HR leaders right now, and they're fried. Like, oh no, we got to do a vaccination policy, and I've got a field office in Texas and a field office in California, and it's like two warring tribes of different perspectives on that issue.
Well, and an investment, if they do decide to return to work, I mean, going from that open and office environment, right, to now a more restricted or cubicle-based, office environment, which has connotations, So I don't know. That's going to be an investment either one way or the other. Invest in tools for a remote workforce. They're going to have to invest in remodeling or a new type of office environment, perhaps, right? And there's going to be costs associated with that. So either way,
at a minimum, regardless of how you play this out in your organization, your opportunity to be successful is going to, in a larger part than it's ever been before, result from how well you can manage remote people. Because if you can, your pool just got a whole lot bigger that you can go higher, right? And if your comfort level got raised, I was in Durango, Colorado 2 months ago. Fascinating experience going to a town, not a suburb, a town basically in the middle of nowhere. It's heaven. It's an outdoor paradise. I'd never been there before, never been to Colorado before, believe it or not, other than going through the Denver airport. So there we are, and I'm talking to business leaders, and they're scared, particularly the ones that have jobs that people can do from their homes in Durango, who are all in an office before. This beautiful attraction location, right, for people. So I said, why are you worried? And they said, because all my employees, and they said, and ourselves included, we're getting calls from organizations all over the world now. Never called us before. Now they're calling us. And I said, oh, so you're worried that people can live here and have all the benefits and work for someone else. That's right. I said, yeah, but you do realize you can also recruit. If you got comfortable, you can also recruit all over the world too. And they're like, yeah, but we haven't done that before. We're not sure we could be successful doing it. So it's just interesting. I felt for them, but it's a moment. I was like, well, this is a moment in our lifetimes. We've got to figure this out right now. And you're going to have to look at your talent portfolio and your recruiting addressable market differently, and that skill of leading remotely is something you're going to need to get better at. Now, you may at the end decide, no, there is a multiple of human energy that's just realized when we're all together that it can't be replaced by technology. And I don't know. I don't know where I sit on that one. I'm an extrovert. I can't even explain the energy I have when I'm in a room of people. It doesn't suit me, but I also feel massively creative when I'm just driving the car by myself sometimes too, So I don't know how all that mix is going to work, but I agree with the premise of your question, Nick, which is you really need to give us a lot of thought and figure out where you want to land on this one. Because if doing nothing, big cost. Doing something prematurely, big, potential cost too, right? And it depends on your business too, right?
To be continued, Steve. Let's talk again, and we'll see what pans out over the next few months. And again, thank you for joining us. It's always fun chatting with you. We really appreciate your advisory support and all the good ideas you have for Honeit. And everybody, just want to, again, talk about Steve Cadigan's book, Workquake, Embracing the Aftershocks of COVID-19 to Create a Better Model of Working. Who doesn't want a better model of working? We spend our waking lives at work, right?
Exactly.
So make it better. Okay, Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Nick. Enjoyed it.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Take care.